Good day, all. Welcome to Python coding. Before we start off with the today's lesson, just want to remind you all that tomorrow and on the 16th, we have two speakers giving talks about the coding career in the IT field. So that would have been sent to you all by a mail on your emails that you have registered with. Okay, now let's get on to today's coding lesson. All right, so today we're doing Python coding lesson 9, and we will be going over functions part 3. So if you remember carefully, if we have a quick recap on what we did yesterday, we did programming moving a turtle, and then we went on to functions with arguments. That is, what is it when we want to send information to a method, or sorry, to a function. And to define this function, we went with def. Remember, that's the keyword to define a function. So we got def, the function name. What is the name of the function you're giving it? Then the arguments you're sending through. We've also learned yesterday that we don't only have to send through one, we can send through multiple arguments. But the first exercise or first example I gave you was the definition for function greet. We sent through the person's name. We had print hello name, and the program started with function greet, and we sent through the word Dave, in this case the name Dave. That was the first one. And then I showed you that a function doesn't only have to receive information, we can actually set information to a default value. And when we set information for a default value, that means if I don't put anything inside the brackets, what must be displayed? So in case somebody runs our function, it mustn't just break. And that example was, again, with the same thing, but if we leave out Dave here, then you'd notice that we have name equals Sam. So this Sam over here was our default name. So if you don't put a name in the brackets here, it'll output Sam automatically. And we did the function with no name. All right, going on to functions. Now remember, I started off this with saying we have three main functions. We have a function that allows a person to do, or allows the function to do work. The second function that receives parameters or arguments, and a third function which can return information back to the program or function that has called it. That means it can send information back to the original program or the function that can call it. And yes, I said function. That means we can call functions within functions. Right. Going on, how do we use this? We define it by saying define function name, just like the normal one. And then we have a body of the function. That means all the work that the function must do for us. And our final step, the final step is to say return, and in brackets, what is the argument or the parameter? In other words, what's the value that you're sending back? Whether it is a string, integer, float, boolean, what is that variable that you want to send back? We put it inside the return statement. And when we actually use a function that can return an answer, it changes slightly. You see, when we return an answer, it means this, whoever called it, whether it was the function or the main program, must store this answer. So I got the variable, var is short of variable. So I got a variable is equal to the function name. And if I wanted, I can put arguments. That's the next part. But it will always be storing on the left. So this return answer will be stored in the variable on the left. For a quick example, if I define this function input, and in function input, I say name is equal to input, what is your name, and a return name. So this function, what is it doing for us? It's going to display a message to the user to enter in their name. And after it enters in their name, it is then going to return the name to the user. And once it returns the name to the user, it means that our main program needs to save it, or whatever function that's calling this up needs to save it. So if you look at our first line in the program, we've got user name equals function input. Now remember, function input is going to now call up the definition, so it's going to do this work. But because I got it now equal to and the username on the left, whatever is going to be returned is now going to be stored in username. That's why I can print username, and what happens? Whatever the person entered in this program is now being stored in username. Let's give that a try to see, to show you how it'll actually work. So I'm going to quickly open up Python. Okay, since that's already on the top, I'm going to open up the 3.81 file, new file, save as lesson 9, and I'm going to call this function input, right? So I'm going to quickly type out what I have in that little file that I had. So at the start I had, right, so I'm going to just go, this is where my functions are going to be. This is where my main program is going to be. So my first function is define function input. And then I had name is equal to input. And I had what is your name? And then finally we had return. And in brackets, we return in the name. Now again, line 3 is going to use an input box and store the name in the variable name. Line 4 is telling we're going to return the name to whoever calls this function. So that's why now when I get to my main program, I can go function input. But you see what will happen now is this function, when it's called, is going to return an answer. But my main program doesn't store it. So I can go random and you can see it ends. And now if I want to output it, I can go print, but I don't know what to output because my function is giving me the answer. Now there's two ways you can actually use a function that's returning an answer. You can save the answer in a variable, and that's what we're going to do. That's the first type. So I'm going to go user name is equal. So now I'm going to say whatever is being returned by this function must be saved in username. Why I'm choosing the variable username? Because I know it's going to return a name. So if it was going to return a mark, I would create a variable for mark. Now these variables do not have to be the same because what's happening is the computer is going to take whatever's been returned and save it in username. So these two variables here, name and username, does not have to be the same. Right. So now I can go and say user name. I can now run it and I can enter a name, let's say Dave, and now it says Dave. Why? Because I've outputted the username. So that's how a function can return information to us. Now, these functions that return information to us, they are mostly used to get information that what we call private variables, which we'll come to later on in classes. But they also mainly used with or in conjunction with with the arguments function inside the bracket, where you can send information to. Right. Let's go back. All right, so we've got, that's the first type of the function that we can use. So it can only return one argument or parameter back, yes. The function, unlike our function which we can send information to, this function can only return one answer at a time. it cannot return more than one. Well, technically it can, if, and we'll go through that later on, but at the moment it can only return one value at a time. Right. So let's go on, move on. Next one. Right. So the next one is a function that allows arguments to be passed to it, and then once it is done with or done work, it will then return an answer. And how we do this is by simply saying define the function name, giving it arguments, that means what we want to send to it, have the body, and then finally return it. Just like the other one, the only difference is now we've got arguments on the top. So looking at this example, so if I define a function input, I can send through the person's name. I can ask them what's the name of the mark without creating global variables. I know some of you will say, but it'll be easier using global variables. Yes, it would. But remember, when we use global variables, we don't have control over them. So we try to reduce as much as possible using global variables. Okay, so let's try this in a program. So I'm going to go File, New File, Save, and this time I'm going to save it as input with arguments. Now I'm going to quickly go back to the other one and just going to copy and paste it faster than me typing the entire thing, and just altering it to what I wanted. So the function input, I was going to send them the person's name. So this question is going to change now because we know the person's name. And we were going to take in the person's mark here. Mark is normally an integer. Right, so I can say, I can give them a question, enter in your mark. And if I was correct, I had a colon, sorry, not colon, a plus sign, and I had the person's name for the person's name. And then finally, we can return the mark, and we can use the mark on the outside. Print your mark was mark. Again, you don't have to make these marks the same. So if I wanted to go and say this, what as it I'm actually saving, I'm saving the math mark. So I could actually change this to show that I'm just saving the math mark, because remember, when we create variables, our variables need to be descriptive of what we're doing. It needs to describe what we're doing. If you want to put it in short form, you can, but remember, when somebody else is reading your work, they must know what is going on. So you'll need to put comments and tell them what that short form means. So if I quickly run this, missing one input. If you notice, it's said missing one input because when I called up the function's waiting for a name. Because I didn't put a default name, it gave me that little error where it was still waiting. So if I put a default there, it would work. So I'm going to just put in the person's name here, and I'm going to say Dave, just for this time being. All right. So it says enter your mark, Dave. Remember, if we look at this, we've sent through the name Dave. That's how it knows in line 3 that to the variable name is actually holding Dave. So I'm going to put in a mark. Once you put in a mark, remember it's going to go to the next line now. So it's going to go to line 4 and it's going to return mark. So when it goes to line 4 and returns mark, it comes back to line 7 and it says line 7 now needs to hold the mark that I enter. So if I put 45, it'll hold 45. So this entire thing here gets replaced with 45 the moment I return. So when I put enter, math mark is now equal to 45 because it returned 45. And I printed your mark was math mark. So it went to math mark and said, what are you holding? It's holding 45. So that's how the program there worked. Okay, going on to the next part, which is a little activity. Okay, my activity went in backwards order, so there we are. Right, the first one. Write a program using functions to determine and returns the number of words in a sentence. For example, if we have input, it's time to have some fun. The number of words is 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, in order to actually write a program like this, we need to figure out first, how do we know number of words? And if some of y'all said yes, it's because a word always has a space between it, you are correct. So if we know how many spaces, we can also determine how many words. But some of you might be saying, but there's only 5 spaces here. And you'd be correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But there's 6 words. So according to our spaces and our words is always 1 more than our spaces. So if we can find how many spaces the sentence has, add 1 to it, we can have how many words. Right. And for those of y'all that's trying to figure out, what happens if a person puts in more spaces, we'll get to that later on. Let's try and do that program first. So I'm going to go File, New File. Let's quickly save this. I'm going to call this number words. Right, now I got a program to determine the number of words. We can start coding. So if we had to code this without actually writing functions, how would we actually do this? The first thing we'd need to do is we would have to get in the person's sentence. So we would go sentence is equal to input, and we'd ask them to enter in the sentence. After that, you'd have to now figure out if how many spaces you've got in the sentence that the person has entered. So how would do that? Yes, we would first have to find the length of the sentence, because now we're going to go through each character that the person enters. So if I enter today was hot, you'd have to go through every character. And when you go through every character, you'll have to check if the character is a space. And if the character is a space, you know that you have a word. So we're going to first find the length, because we need to know how many characters we've got, just to know how many times we're going to do this work. So we're going to go length of the sentence is equal to length sentence. Now remember, why do I have to put a dot there? So let's put underscore, right. So remember, the function length is going to tell us how many characters there is in the sentence. So this is going to return 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's going to return 13 characters. So I need to check 13 characters if they are a space. Now, if I'm going to do this repeatedly, we're going to actually run a looping structure. because we're going to do the same thing over and over. Before that, I'm just going to say my number of words is equal to 0, just to know that I have 0 words at the start. Now we can either use the for loop or we can use the while loop, because those are the two looping structures we learned. So we need to determine when to use them. And if you remember carefully, we use the for loop when we know exactly how many times we are going to repeat something. And we use a while loop when we don't know. So if we look at this, whenever a person enters a sentence, do we know how many times to repeat something? The answer is yes. We're always going to repeat it for the length of the sentence. So this will be a for loop. So I'm going to go for, I'm going to have a count variable to count in the range length of the sentence. Now, some of you might be saying, but there's 13 characters. This is going to go from 0 to 12. I'm taking that, sorry, I'm taking the example here. Remember this example, you had 13 characters. But this is only going to go 0 to 12, because remember, if the number is 13 on the inside, that 13 is not included. But that is correct, because when I check each character, it's not character 1, it's character 0. It's not character 2, it's character 1. Our characters start at 0. So if there's 13 characters, our character will end at, yes, 12. It's always one less than how many characters you actually have. Now, don't forget, the positions are different from the number of characters you got. So this is going to be position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, onwards. So that's why it is fine that we go in 0 to 12, because we'll need to start from position 0. All right. And now that we're starting off at position 0, we need to figure out what is it we're going to repeat. What we're going to repeat is we're going to be checking if that sentence character, and the sentence character, remember, count is going to count from 0 to 12. So we're going to go count is a space. So we're going to check if that is a space. So we put in a blank space. If I wanted the letter A, I'll put in the letter A. All right. So I'll put check, is that position the let is a space? So is this a space? 0. Is position 1 a space? Is position 2 a space? Is position 3 a space? Is position 4 a space? And it'll continue. And when it does find it to be a space, what must it do? The first thing we're going to do is, because we found it to be a space, we're going to increase words by 1. Remember, we can use plus equal to, or we could have went the long way around by saying words is equal to words plus 1. These two statements mean the exact same thing. I'm just using the shorter one this time, right? Remember, plus equal means add on to the whatever you got. Minus equal means subtract from whatever you got, right? So we're going to move on to this and say, right, now that we've got the words, I can then display the answer. Now, so I can go out to my program. I can say print. I can go number of words is what? Oh, not a full stop, a comma. And then we're allowed to do this because remember, the comma is different from the plus sign. The comma allows you to put the variables as is, so it'll automatically do the conversion for you. Right. So if we run this program and see what happens, if we enter in a sentence, today was hot, we know that we have 3 words, But look at what our answer is. Oh, sorry. Length sentence is not defined. I spelled it incorrectly, didn't I? Yes. It's a small s. Remember I said Python is case sensitive. So when I said capital S here, it looked for a capital S for length sentence. And it said not defined, wasn't found. All right. Let's try this one more time. Today was hot. And it tells me the number of words was 2. Why told me it was 2? Because when I counted 2 spaces. So after we got the number of words, we don't start it off at 0. We need to start it off at 1. But we only start it off at 1. There. So now if we run it, and we enter the same sentence, oh, I left out the T, right? But you can see it gave me 3 now. So we added 1 extra to that. Now, some of you might be asking yourself, but what happens if some person decides to go and put extra spaces there? Well, if they decide to go and put extra spaces, we're going to have some problems. And if I go and put couple space in the end here, tells me I got 16 words. The only reason it did that was because I put 2 extra spaces here, and I put a few extra spaces here. So the computer went continuously and looked at the extra spaces. And to solve that problem, we will get back to this program when we do string handling. I know some of y'all must be saying, but we did string handling. No, we did string manipulation, how we can change and alter some strings. When we do string handling, we learn how to remove anything extra. So in this case, the extra spaces. And so we'll come back to that. So if a person types in normally, there we can count how many words they have. Right. So now let's convert this to a function. So if we looked at the question one more time, the function must determine and return the number of words. So the function must return the number of words. So the entire thing needs to go into a function. So functions. So I'm going to define a function. So I'm going to go define. I'm going to call this check words. And when I check words, I can say, all right, all this needs to be in check words. So I'm just going to indent everything. If you highlight everything and press tab, it automatically indents the work for you. So now everything is in the check words. And then finally, remember, if we return in an answer, we need to say return. And what am I returning? I'm returning how many words I have. So now before I can print it, there's two things. There's one of two things you can do. You can either save it or you can print it straight away. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save it first. So I'm going to go word, also main. I'm going to go word. Oh, let's go with number of words is equal to check words. And now this will call up the function that we created, check words, and that needs to be an underscore. And it'll store the answer in number of words. So now we print number of words. And now we've converted our normal program into a function. For words. Right. Now I said there's two ways. You can either store the information just like how you can see it here, or you see, because the answer's been returned, we can put the answer straight away in our print statement. How we do that is by calling the function inside the print statement. So what this will do, instead of storing the information, it'll go straight and print it for us. All right, there we go. It went and printed it straight for us without saving it. So the reason why we prefer not to do this most of the time is because if I wanted to use number of words later on, let's say after this line, I wanted to say that the number of words for every word you put, you're going to get, or you have to pay 10 cents, then that means now we can't do a calculation because remember, we printed it, we didn't save it. That's the reason why we normally save it before we can print. So now with this case, I can actually go here and I can do a calculation to work out how much a person is going to pay per word, right? Then think of this as an article that the person writes or an ad in the paper word, right? So moving on, so let's quickly save this. Remember, you've got the link to the folder. You can always download it from there and look at it and edit it. Next, write a program using functions to determine if the number of uppercase and lowercase letters in a sentence. So this time, if we put in a sentence, we need to know how many uppercase characters and how many lowercase. So we look at the sentence here, we can see there's 1, 2 uppercase letters, but the number of lowercase letters are the rest. So we need to figure out how many uppercase letters and how many lowercase letters. So what we're going to do is going to quickly go and open up a new program. I closed Python. All right, Python. New file. I go save. Call this check letters. All right, so we can do the long way around and find the program and then convert it into functions, or we can go straight into the function itself. So we know that we're going to write a function out to determine whether a letter is uppercase or lowercase. So in order to determine if something is uppercase or lowercase, we'll need to actually, in our main program, get a sentence. So I'm going to go main. So I'm going to go sentence is equal to input, just like before. Enter in a sentence. To check. Sorry about the spelling, it's just went off. All right, sentence to check. Then I need to write in my functions. So if I look at my function, the Facebook page for Team Geeks is there, right? Right, so now we've got that. I now need to go and find how many uppercase and lowercase functions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write out 2 functions. I'm going to write out a function for finding the number of uppercase letters, and I'm going to write out a function to find out the number of lower case functions. So in order to write two functions, that's going to tell me how many letters in a sentence, and I've only inputted it once, I'll actually have to receive it. So this is a function that has parameters, has arguments in itself. Just so that you know that it's two different sentences variables, right? Now for the uppercase one, let's work with that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say letters is equal to 0. Well, that's O, 0, right? So that we know that we're starting off with a clean slate, that we have no letters. Then we're going to say, all right, just like before, length of sentence is equal to the length of the sentence, to find out how long the sentence is. Now that we know how long the sentence is, we're going to be counting each character. So we're counting each character in the sentence. It means I'm going to do the same thing over and over. And if you remember the last program, we used a for loop because we knew how many times we're going to repeat. In this case, again, we know how many times we're going to repeat. So again, we will use a for loop. So I'm going to go for count in range of the length of the sentence. All right. I'm going to do some work. Now, some of you might be saying, length of sentence is there, length of sentence is there. Couldn't you just put the function inside here? And yes, I can put this function length sentence in there and it will still work, because remember, length sentence is telling you, it's a function that returns an answer to you of how long the sentence is. It's just that I like to do it step by step so that you know what is happening. So you know at this line, you're going to get how long the sentence is, and it's saved in length sentence. And that's what we are using. We're using the length sentence, how long it is. So that's why I do it in 2 lines. And yes, you can compress it into 1 if you understand how. All right. So I'm going to go length of sentence, and I'm going to go if the sentence, and I'm going to look at the character and then the character in position count, because remember, count will start at 0 because I didn't give it a starting position, and it's going to go right up till the last character. And because I'm using positions, it'll include the last character, right? And I'm going to say, all right, if this character dot is upper. Now, is upper is a function that is made in string manipulation to check if the character is uppercase. So if this character at this position is upper, then I need to increase letters. So I'm going to say letters is equal, oh, let's go with the short form, plus equal to 1. Again, this is the same thing as saying letters. Oh, I got S there, right? Letters is equal to letters plus 1. It's just a short way of doing it, right? It means adds 1 to it. And then finally, I can go outside my loop instruction. Remember, every indent means for whatever function or whatever you loop using. So all the lines that's right attached to this side here is now attached to the definition. So this if statement was attached to the for loop because it was indented. The statement here in line 7 was indented, so it's attached to the if statement. Now, make sure that you know where's your indentation, right? I'm going to go return, and I'm going to return letters. And I'm going to quickly run this program to check if it works. I'm going to go number uppercase letters is equal to, might be just faster if I just copy and paste it. Right. paste it and take out the S number. Right. Just quick print line. Print number of upper is, let's be typing the entire thing out faster for just copy and paste. Now, the reason why I'm not going to do the next definition is, what if I have a problem with this definition? I need to solve it and then look at the next one. But if I just type out the next one, and if I have too many errors, it's going to just look untidy and I won't know where to start. So I'm going to start with this. Let's see if the first function works. And it didn't. Oh. Now I'll tell you what the pass does just now, right? Enter in a sentence today. So we look at it. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 small letters. Length sentence not defined in main. Right, so we've got an error. So talking about, if we have errors, we need to solve it before we move any further. Length letters. Length sent. Oh, why do I have an S there? Right. Today, again, 4. Oh, sorry, it was uppercase, right? So I got 1 uppercase letter. So that's what I checked. Number of uppercase letters, 1. So I can quickly go back just to double check that it works properly. Type in something else, TODAYWA. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 this time. So 5 uppercase. Works. So it's working for the uppercase. Now I just need to copy it. Oh, I said I'm going to tell you what the pass is for. Oh, thanks for that. Uppercase, right? That's why I copied and pasted the same function there, right? Remember, as long as your functions are written correctly, it would run. Thanks for that. Right, so if I look at what pass does, I want to tell you what it does. It allows the function to be written with nothing in it. So what happens is, now the function will say, if there's anything here, it'll just look past it. Pass, that's what it does. I'm just going to pass over my information. Right, so that got rid of that little error that told me that it had a function because we wrote the function out without giving anything information in it. Right. So now I can paste it there. And I forgot the L. All right. So again, this will be letters. I go sent letters, length sentence, everything's right. Except for now, I am not checking the uppercase. I am now checking the lowercase. So now I go is lower. Now that I got is lower, this is working because that's the only difference between both the programs. One was checking upper, one is checking lower. So now I can finally go copy. Oh, man. Copy. Paste. Change this to lowercase. I'm sending through the sentence, and I have to change this also to lowercase. And finally, I'm just going to copy and paste it. All right. And this time it is not the uppercase that I'm printing, it is the lowercase. Right, so the lowercase letters. So quickly run it. Enter sentence to check. TODA. y, we can see we've got 2 uppercase and 3 lowercase. So let's add another word, so is. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lowercase. There you go. 2 uppercase, 5 lowercase letters. And no, it doesn't count the space because spaces aren't uppercase or lowercase, just like how numbers won't be counted. One uppercase, 4 lowercases, numbers weren't counted because they weren't uppercase or lowercase. So this works no matter what you have. So that is our uppercase and lowercase program. Check how many letters. All right, let's move on. Right. Next, the activity. Write a function that will, number one, write a function that will take in 2 numbers and return the sum of those 2 numbers. Write a function, number 2, write a function that will take in 2 numbers and return the difference. Number 3, write a function that will take in 2 numbers and return the product. Number 4, write a function that will take in 2 numbers and return the quotient. We'll come to number 5 after that. So we'll do number 5 last to show you how it will work. So quickly going back to that program. There we have it. File, new. Save. Let's call this maths. Right. So we're going to write in some functions. So we're going to have a definition. Functions. So we're going to have a definition. And the definition for the first one was the sum. And I'm not going to use sum because sum is a special word in Python. So I'm just going to go add. Right, so I'm going to go add. And this function, when we write in it, it said we're going to receive 2 values. Now, when you see word like this, receive, sorry, it'll take in 2 numbers. Take in 2 numbers mean it's going to receive. So there's 2 ways I can say take in variables, take in parameters, receive arguments, then that means now the program must have information on the top bracket. When you say return, that means at the end of the program or the end of the function, it needs to return. Right now, when I say end of the function, now you can have it between the function itself. That means inside the if statements, you can have more than one return. Okay, so let's start with this. I'm going to receive 2 values. So I'm going to have number 1 and number 2. And when I receive the 2 values, I'm going to take them and find the addition of it. So I'm going to go, I'm just going to go answer and stuff. All right, answer is equal to number 1 plus number 2. And then finally, I'm going to return the answer. 1A. Right. Next, I'm going to copy and paste this. And I'm going to copy and paste it for sum, subtraction, multiplication, division. So I'm going to go sub, multiply, and division. Changed our calculations, obviously. It needs to change. The subtraction, multiplication, wrong place, and division. Now, I'm going to quickly test if this works before I go on to the point number 5. And we're going to just quickly go and write a main part of the work. I keep writing dollar. All right, main. So we're going to quickly test at least one of them works, right? So let's test the addition or subtraction, multiplication, or division. Let's go with it. So print add. Let's put in two numbers, 3 and 4. So we should get the answer 7. Let's check. So we got the answer 7. So that worked. Let's quickly test the subtraction. I know it would work, but just to show you all that it would. And if any errors does pop up, you can solve it. Subtraction -1, that works. Multiplication, 12, right? And division, we're going to take 12 there. 3, correct. Right, so that works. So now I can go and read that. Point number 5 again. Point number 5, it says, write a program that will import the module created above. You see, when we creating all these programs, we actually creating modules, right? So like the chart before, and I previously mentioned it. And it lets the user select the operator and to use to corresponding operator. So if they ask for addition, subtraction, multiplication, like the maths tutor one, right? So we're going to create a different program and we're going to import this. So quickly going to save. Remember, it's called maths. It's important to know what the file is called. So we go file, save, and I'm going to save this as using the math class, right? So we're going to say, all right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have our import statements. And what are we going to import? We're going to import maths. Now, because we imported maths, we can now use whatever functions that was created in maths. That means we can use add, subtract, multiply, and division in this program without writing it out now. So I can go, okay, I'm going to write out my main program. And I know I said we're going to have all those headings and we're going to put it in there just now. I'm just going to copy it out from the previous work. But for the time being, I'm just going to show you that it actually works this way. Right. Right. So if we go with this, we're going to do the if statement. So we're going to have choices. So we're going to say selection. I'm just going to go short form select is equal to input enter in what? 1, 2, 2. Right? So if selection is equal to 1, I'm going to call up the addition. So I'm going to print, I'm going to say answer. Let's go with number 1 is equal to the int input, enter in number 1. I'm just going to take it out from here. Instead of have multiple statements, I just want one. Right, so I'm going to put it in there. Number 1, number 2, because we only need 2 numbers. All right, so I'm going to assume for the time being, number 1 is addition, 2 is subtraction, 3 multiplication, and 4 is division. When I put in the message, you'll see it there as well. And the person can see it. So just for the time being, to show you how this works, I'm going to leave it as is. So if they select 1, that means they want to do addition. That means I need to call up the addition one. So I'm going to say my answer is equal to, let's just put the time being answer equal to 0, and I'll come back to that later. So now I can say answer is equal to maths dot, and if you look it up, wrong one. If I look at my function, it's called add. And when we say add, we need to send them two numbers. So I can go maths dot add, and I need to send them two numbers. So the two numbers is num1 and num2. And I'm going to quickly go and print. Print the sum of number one. Let's just put number one, and I left out this semicolon, comma, sorry, and number two, again, I forgot the comma, is answer. So what have we done? We have imported the math class that we created, and after we imported it, we used it by simply saying maths.add. So now we have access to all the functions in there. So let me quickly run this, enter what I want to do, and I know I put in the function for 1, so I'm going to put in 1, enter number 1, 12, enter number 2, 2, and it didn't work. I probably broke something there. 1 second. Selection is 1, number is there, answer is answer. All right. Math.add. What's that? Oh, that's strange. Can't seem to see why it's not working there. I think I figured out why it's not working right. All right. Okay, so when I input it over here, remember when you use input box, it inputs as text. And when we check in it here, it's actually an integer. So I think that was the problem. We actually input in a number. Right. Yeah. So you can see everybody makes little mistakes all over the place. So 12 and 12, there we go, 24. All right, so we've got the addition. And all we need to do is copy and paste this for the others and say multiplication and give it a proper heading to tell the person what 1, 2, 3, and 4 does. So in this case, we've actually hide in our program. That's how we can use our functions in different programs by just importing them. You can see in this program, it wasn't written. And to answer your question again, yes, if I close this, it'll still work. It doesn't have to be open. All that needs to be done is when you create in functions that you want to use in another program, is make sure that the function, so in this case, the maths program that we're using, and the using maths program is in the same folder. When you start linking your own little modules together, you'll see that it creates this little class on the top here for you. It's just that it's slightly different. You don't have to pay much attention to it. It automatically creates. Right. So that was the fifth question. And of course, the last part of the fifth question was you had to do the visual aspects, as in put in the interface for the person, enter 1 for addition, enter 2 for multiplication. So just copy it from the Maths Tutor program. Right. Then, of course, I wanted to look at the Maths Tutor program as your homework. So for the Maths Tutor program, I want you to change it to write in the functions. let's see if you can actually do that. And I'll answer that with you tomorrow. Again, a little reminder that the talks will be done tomorrow and on the 16th, and the invites will be in your mail. Do I have any questions before I end today's lesson? All right, there's no questions. And wish you a good afternoon, and I'll see you tomorrow. Of course, if you're watching the videos, the talks, I'll see you on YouTube. Right. Have a good day. Goodbye.